Reasoned reality is built on one conviction. When people are given evidence, clarity, and the freedom to think for themselves, they choose a better future. In a culture shaped by outrage, conspiracy, and rigid belief systems, this is a space for honest conversation where reason matters and facts still count. We talk with biblical scholars, historians, activists, artists, and everyday people navigating faith, politics, and culture with honesty and courage. Nothing is off the table. If you're tired of easy answers and ready for conversations that actually go somewhere, you're in the right place. This is Reasoned Reality. Hey friends, welcome back to the Reasoned Reality podcast. My name is Joe Smith. I'm your host. I'm excited about today. This is going to be a really good conversation, especially since this is on like the doorstep of America's birthday, the big 250. Today's guest is Andrew Seidel. He is a constitutional attorney, an author, and one of the leading voices examining Christian nationalism in America. I was telling him off camera before we recorded that I had just finished his book, The Founding Myth, and told him that, well, I told you it was overwhelming, just the amount that you were able to bring together. And it was like, I've got more questions about it later, but man, it was just, it was a lot. I mean that
look,
in a good way.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, because that was, to be honest, this was the goal of the founding myth, right? I wanted to end the debate forever about whether the United States was founded as a Christian nation based on Judeo-Christian principles, right? Like that's the central tenet of Christian nationalism. It's bullshit. It's disinformation. And I wanted to give everybody the best arguments for fighting back against that. And, I was in this fight for 10 years before I even sat down to start writing the book. Like it is kind of, it draws on the wealth of experience I have debating this both in courts of law, on Fox News, all over the place, like conservative talk show radio, which is like one of my favorite things to do ever. And I wanted to give everybody who's listening, everybody who reads the book, the best arguments to fight back against this disinformation. But it also had to be based on the best facts and real history. And so, it's bulletproof in terms of the citations and the actual history in the book. And the point was to be overwhelming. So you could, go into that debate at Thanksgiving dinner with your crazy ass uncle and overwhelm them with the truth and with good and better arguments. And I like one last point on this. It's like not just arguments, right? Because I think so many times our side is like, well, the founding fathers actually said this, and the facts are actually this, and this is the. I do that all the time. I'm going to do that. People can throw those words back in my face in a minute. But it's also like we have to have emotional arguments and those gut punch arguments and those arguments that actually get at the identity of Christian nationalism. And this is an entire identity based on disinformation. So when we go after it and we use those emotional appeals and those emotional hits, paired and partnered with facts and history, we really can change minds and win this.
I know this may seem weird, but do you watch The Office?
I mean, I did. I haven't watched it recently. And I will say that kind of the group of creators there, I love a lot of the stuff they do. And I, they did Parks and Rec too, which I actually like a little bit better than The Office. And then they did The Good Place, which is like one of my favorite shows of all time. Yeah. Yeah. But yes.
The reason I asked is because when you were saying like, well, our side is, well, actually, it made me think of Oscar, where they have that scene where his nickname is actually. So you're saying that the left is a gay accountant from the Office.
I think that, yes, I think people can quote me on that.
Okay.
I think so.
We just wanted to make sure that the quote was right. All right. Well, Andrew, again, thank you for taking the time. You have spent years immersed in Christian nationalism. I'm curious, what still surprises you?
That's a really good question. And I think one thing that is slightly different about me compared to some of like our friends and folks you've had on this podcast, right? And like the brilliant scholars out there, like Sam Perry and Andrew Whitehead, Kristen Kobes-Dumay, even Brad Onishi to a certain extent, right? Like these are brilliant scholars who do a great job of explaining what Christian nationalism is, breaking it down, identifying the various beliefs, right? Like Matthew Taylor, Robbie Jones, great at this. But I've been in the trenches fighting it, right? Like that's what I have been doing. I've been fighting in the courts of law and, on television, in our public school system. I've been fighting Christian nationalists, these bullies who want to abuse the power of public offices to impose their personal religion on everybody else. So I come at it from, I think, a much different perspective than a lot of our really close friends in this movement. And the thing that I arguably surprises me the most is actually something about the founding myth. It came out now 7 years ago. And when I wrote it, as I explained, I wrote it to end the debate. And I thought at the time, like, shit, I'm going to have to update this book like in a year or two, right? Like, because they're going to see that all the arguments they have are, are so bad and so fallacious that our side's going to buy this book or go to their library and read this book. And we're going to start turning the tide on the narrative that they're going to have to dig deep and try to come up with new disinformation. So I'm going to have to, rewrite or add a whole new chapter on whatever new arguments they come up with. And that's the thing that's the most striking to me about it is they've got no new arguments. They've got nothing new. They just repeat the same bullshit propaganda over and over and over again. And it's actually, the reason it's effective is because it is propaganda, right? Propaganda works, sadly, unfortunately. And it's in the fractured media environment that we find ourselves in, it can be even more effective. So that to me is like, it was surprising, and maybe it was actually just naive at the time. But I do just want to say, like, I still have a tremendous amount of hope when it comes to changing people's minds about this. Like a lot of the folks that are some of the most outspoken critics of Christian nationalism, like our friends on the gram, right? Like, let's just, April LaJoy, Tim Whitaker, Monty Mader, right? Like, they were avowed Christian nationalists just a few years ago. So it really, they are living testaments to the fact that people can change their mind when they are presented with better facts, better arguments, and also emotional appeals and appeals to their basic humanity. Because one of the things I think Christian nationalism excels at, and one of the reasons I think it's attractive to a lot of Christian nationalists, though they would never phrase it like this, is that it creates a permission structure that allows them to subvert and subjugate their innate morality and empathy for others in favor of this idea that they're special and they should have this special privileged place, which, like, you kind of get. Who doesn't want to feel like that? But also you're doing it at the expense of other people, often minorities that are already under, pretty significant, we'll use the euphemism, stress in this country.
I think that is so insightful because as you were talking, and even before you brought up like Tim and Monty and April, I was thinking about my own story. And I've talked about it often where, dude, I can remember watching the first Iraq or the second Iraq war, were shock and awe. I mean, I specifically remember sitting, watching the TV, watching it take place and thinking, good, we're going to show them.
Yeah.
And it was coming from that place. And at the time, I would not have had language for this, but it was a very Christian nationalist worldview. Like, good, we are the righteous arm of the Lord.
Yeah.
And we're doing these things. Sorry if that's triggering for people listening, but that's what I was thinking at the time. And even to go a little bit further, like if you had come into my church office anytime, probably the first, let's see, I guess I probably stopped doing it right around like 2011, 2012, right in there. But if you came in and sat in my office, I had a couch in my office, you would have sat underneath the Gadsden flag in my office.
Oh, really?
Because it was hung on the wall. For those that don't know what the Gadsden flag is, yellow, don't tread on me flag, because it was my favorite flag during the Revolutionary, during that time period history. But that was my church office, man. You walked in, that was the first thing you were going to see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fascinating. I don't know if you know this. They actually just redesigned, MAGA just redesigned that flag. It was just, I think it was made this morning. It says "Tread on me, Daddy." That's what they're going with now. No, I mean, it's, but
you were.
I got you. Yeah. I'm a little different when you get me in a podcast. But I mean, like, this is my point, right? Like think of how far you have come.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure, like, people listening, I'm sure, like, and this is, to me, like, and look, I get it. Listen, everybody, I get it. I don't want to be Pollyanna here. I mean, our government is beyond corrupt. I mean, that's like saying that our government is corrupt, right? The regime is corrupt is like, it's funny because it's such an understatement. It's like things are really fucking hard. Like, it seems like every part of our country is designed to make your life harder. Like, if you've ever, like, I was dealing with my insurance about a medication earlier this week, and it's just like, the guy I'm talking to on the phone his job is to stonewall and make my life as miserable as possible for as long as possible. It's like, but there is, I really do believe there is reason to hope when it comes to this stuff. And it's because, people can and do and are changing their minds. And in fact, like, there's a central contradiction in Christian nationalism that gives me kind of maybe the most hope. And it's the idea that their power hungry aggression is growing our movement. Right?
Mm,
Like, again, at its most basic level, Christian nationalism is about favoring this small group of people, right? Like straight white conservative Christian men. Like that's who are going to be lifted into this special favored class if we become a Christian nation. So by definition, every win that they get is actually driving people away from that movement. Right. So they're
mhm,
creating this kind of feedback loop. They're working to privilege this chosen class. So every legislative and legal victory that they notch is alienating more people. It's waking more people up to the danger, and it's driving more people away from their movement. So their power hungry aggression is growing our counter movement towards it. And I mean, like if you mentioned our 250th birthday, like they are crusading because we are working to meet that unmet promise in the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution, right? The self-evident truth that all of us are equal, that we the people means all of the people. And previous generations, of course, have failed to realize those aspirations, and they've left it to their children to, contend with human tragedies like slavery and segregation and the subjugation of women and discrimination against LGBTQ people and the climate crisis. But as we continue to march toward that progress, Christian nationalists are fighting ever harder against it. And they're not going to go gently. They're going to rage against the dying of their privilege. But in the end, we are going to win. And that's because they are fighting only for themselves. And where they are selfish, we can be selfless. They want supremacy, we want equality. That is why, in the end, we are going to triumph. Not because our principle is inherently better than theirs, though it is.
it
Let's
is.
just be clear about that. It is.
Yes, it is.
But because the math is on our side, we have the numbers. That's what they're fighting against. That's what they're raging against. And they can rage all they want, but you can't fight math.
Yes, and amen to all of that. I'm curious from your perspective because you are so in the trenches, talking about, how, and you can see it happening in real time. Like, fascism always likes to overreach, and it's, they're overreaching and,
Oh
and
yeah.
people are falling away. But I, I'm curious, even after this version is gone, racism, misogyny, all of these things do a really
Yeah.
good job of like not going away, just kind of like hiding and morphing and meeting the moment of whatever it is. So I'm curious from your perspective, after all the time that you've spent fighting against this, what do you think, especially right now where we're talking about, we just had the rededicating America thing,
Ugh.
where this huge, yes, it was disgusting. But what do
So
you think for the everyday person? Like, what are they actually longing for? What need is this meeting for people?
for the everyday average Christian nationalist,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah. What do you think?
I think that's a really good question, and I will start off by saying, even though I majored in neuroscience in undergrad, I am not a psychologist, and I left that field behind. So I'm venturing into speculation here, but I think that it taps that human need to feel special, and in particular, it gives them a sense of being special while also putting them in this kind of community. And the community is built around othering outsiders, which is not the way to build community, but that doesn't mean that they haven't done it. Right? Like they scapegoated absolutely everybody that is brown or black or looks different from them, that is, doesn't speak English the way they think it should be spoken, or doesn't speak English at all, right? Anybody who is different, they scapegoat as an enemy, as the problem, right? And it's immigrants, it's LGBTQ people, especially trans folk. And that othering partnered with that feeling of, it's a feeling of being superior, right? Like, that's what it really is. It's less being special and more being superior. And I think if we're being honest, you can understand the appeal of that a little bit.
Yeah, completely.
But it's also like, you're not friends. You're people. We all lead these super complicated lives that we don't, and rich internal lives, and we fail to recognize that in other people all the time. And you're not special, and there's no reason, even if you were, that you should be favored under the law, which is really what we're kind of getting at with the fights that I do on a daily basis against Christian nationalism. They're looking for legal favoritism, right? Whether it's an exemption from basic civil rights laws so that they can discriminate against a gay couple that wants to buy a product from them, to take an example that people might remember, the gay wedding cake case, or whether they believe that their religious freedom should be a right that includes violating the rights of other people, including other people's kids. For instance, abusing the power of a public office at a public school to impose your religion on other people's kids on the 50-yard line at a football game. Right? Like, that's an abuse of power. That's you're claiming religious freedom, but you're actually trampling the rights of other people. And it's that feeling of specialness and of superiority that I think is intoxicating for so many Christian nationalists. And it's once you get a taste of it, it's hard. I think it's hard to let go. And I think, like, that kind of goes to what I was talking about at the beginning, where it's like, you're not going to convince somebody out of that by pointing out that our Constitution doesn't mention God or Jesus, or quoting the Treaty of Tripoli, right? Like, that's not gonna move them off of that feeling of intoxication and feeling superior, right? So we do need to have these kind of emotional appeals and things that drive people at an emotional level. And if you listen to, I'd be curious to hear, in fact, your pieces, but I did a panel at the Summit for Religious Freedom with Monty and Tim, and if you listen to them tell their stories, it's not something cerebral that drove them to start leaving. It's something emotional that happened to them, or that happened to a person that they loved more often, that gets them to start seeing and maybe shedding some of those kind of biases that we have, confirmation bias, for instance, that allows them to maybe see a little bit more clearly, and then start to be open to those other arguments and to those facts and to the Treaty of Tripoli.
Well, that's exactly the case. I mean, for me, there were some like, theological things that were taking place, but honestly, I think for like a lot of us, I was kind of already making my way past where I was as far as like being so hardcore, and
Yeah.
just kind of slowly kind of inching away from that. But when it was the rise of Trump, like I
Yeah.
just, I was still far more conservative. I was pastoring a typical conservative evangelical church, and I've always been never Trump. I was always a never Trump or never MAGA.
Hmm.
And I wasn't quiet about it even then in the conservative spaces. I just could not understand a group of people who say the most important things that we should follow is love God and love people and treat others as you want to be treated. That we would then like just bow down to a guy that said, "Hey, you can grab him by the pussy if you want to. If you're
Yeah.
if you're rich, that's totally fine. They'll let you do that. No big deal." Or just that alone, not to mention all the credible things that came with him, but just that video alone, I couldn't look. I mean, even if let's just say, even if I had agreed with any of his policies, which I never have, there's no way that I could look at my wife. There's no way that I could look at my daughter and be like, yeah, this is the guy.
This is the person that I
Yeah.
agreed to put
And
in
that's
power.
for me, that's what really cracked the foundation. And then once that started, dude, it was just like it fell apart so fast,
Yeah.
and one thing after the other. Yeah. I
And this, I
totally
mean,
was.
and that's often the way it is. It often is a series of dominoes once you get those first cracks, right? But it's like, it's the you summoning that empathy and thinking about your wife or daughter being the victim of a person like Donald Trump, and then gifting him a scary amount of power, right? Like, the most
Yeah.
powerful office in the world, in the hands of somebody who is willing to do that. Like, and it, like, that is not necessarily, you know, a cerebral argument that is like going to convince people, but it does still do a lot of the work of persuading.
Let me ask you this, because I don't want to pivot too hard, but I do want to get
Pivot as
into
hard as you want.
Yeah, I do want to get into your book a little bit.
Yeah.
If you could take one chapter from the founding myth and force every
Oh,
American celebrating July 4th to read it before the fireworks, which chapter are you choosing and why?
God. That's a really hard question, actually.
So
I
maybe
mean,
give it a couple chapters.
yeah, I mean, I'm tempted. I'll just think out loud. I'm tempted to go with the Declaration. There's two chapters on the Declaration because, we're coming up on the 250. There's already so much disinformation about it. The Declaration does not say what people think it says. People quote it, misquote it all the time. The idea that so many of the Christian nationalist leaders in this country push, and you heard this all the time at the 250th Jubilee, right? Is our rights come from God, not from
Mhm.
government. It's like, that's not what it says. That's not what it says. That's not what they meant. Like, and in fact, the reason that people like Franklin Graham and Robert Jeffress and all these politicians push that idea is because if rights come from God, they can be taken away by men claiming to speak for God, right? And it's always men. And that is the reason that they are pushing this idea. You cannot find that in the Declaration of Independence. And if you think you can, go pick up that chapter of the founding myth and read it. And don't send me the quotes because it's in the founding myth. But I mean, the part 4 of the book is I call it argument by idiom, right? In God we trust, one nation under God, so help me God. And I have to say, I was actually like bitter about having to write those chapters. I think those arguments are so mind-blowingly bad. It's like, yeah, those aren't from the founding era. Like, I get that you like that phrase, but like the earliest ones from 1863, like "In God We Trust" was put on or agreed to put on our coins. Then, wasn't our motto to the 1950s, and that's when
Mhm.
you get "Under God add to the pledge." It's like, just
More
the
propaganda.
date. Yeah, the date should be enough to convince you of how terrible this is, right? And this again, this goes to the actually this. But like, when I do this, and I do this for a living, when I fight Christian nationalism, inevitably, and it's almost the first counter argument out of their mouths is one of these phrases. I mean, it's usually "one nation under God," often "In God we trust." Sometimes "so help me God." And they're so bad, and they don't reflect a founding ethos. They actually reflect what you were just talking about a moment ago before our pivot, which is, you mentioned that there have been kind of these previous waves of Christian nationalism. I don't know if you phrased it quite like that, but there have been previous waves of Christian
Mhm.
nationalism that this country has weathered. And it's often during times of national fear and crisis, right? Like during the Civil War, 1863, during the Red Scare, when people are like, are we going to all be obliterated by a nuclear bomb tomorrow? And it's these times of fear and national crisis when you have politicians abusing that power to impose their religion on everybody else in a way that is fundamentally un-American. And then you have future waves of Christian nationalism turning around and pointing back to those disfiguring scars and saying, see, we really were founded as a Christian nation, even though none of it's from the founding. So, like, if it was, it may be those chapters, just because those arguments are so popular and so
Mhm.
bad and actually kind of disprove the point that they are making. It's like, you're saying that, and I mean, Mike Johnson did this on Fox News, actually, the morning of the 250th. He said, he actually read a quote from Americans United for Separation of Church and State. This is what I do during my day job. I work for Americans United. And he read our quote about the 250th that Rachel Lazar, president and CEO, put out. And we said, essentially, what Rachel said was something like, if they really cared about religious freedom, they would be celebrating the separation of church and state and rededicating our country to that, not to God. I'm paraphrasing. And Mike Johnson goes and, Fox News reads that quote and asks him about it. And he says, well, they're naysayers, and they just want to pretend that this country wasn't founded on the idea of God. And every day I walk in to the House chambers, and you know what it says above my head, carved into the marble, "In God we trust." It's like, that was carved there in 1962, man. Like, you're proving the point. Like, it's not from the founding era. Like, you saying this reflects the founding era and then citing something from 1962 disproves your point. It shows that you do not know what you're talking about. So, I mean, maybe that would be it. It's hard, but I originally started writing the book because of the Ten Commandments chapters, which we're having
Mm,
that fight again now too. So,
again.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny you talk about those. One of the things for me, and now I went into the book, of course, I'm no longer Christian, have any of those kind of tendencies or thoughts or whatever. And I am 100% down with the, separation, like freedom
Mhm.
from religion, freedom of religion has to include freedom from religion. I don't
Absolutely.
want it in our schools. I don't want teachers teaching it. I don't want I don't want FCA, and I used to lead an FCA huddle. I don't want FCA to have unfettered access like they do
Yeah.
now. But one of the things that really surprised me that I had never thought about until reading your book was the word there,
Yeah.
THEIR,
Yeah.
in there where it says their creator, not
Yeah.
the creator.
Yeah.
And I
This
thought,
is it's crazy,
that's
isn't it?
such a good argument.
Yeah, it's so for people who are the Declaration says endowed by their creator with certain endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And if you listen to politicians, especially Christian nationalists, they always read it as endowed by the creator, or their favorite, endowed by our creator. And it's like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
They
No,
specifically read out the idea of a shared creator in this. Like they said there so that the reader can bring their own God to it. It looked like they were very, very careful with this language. They could have said endowed by the Christian God, endowed by Yahweh, endowed by Jesus Christ. They
that would
eschewed
have been the easiest way,
that.
right?
If
Like
if this was a
God,
Christian
yeah,
document, that's what you do, right?
it would have been the
Yeah.
easiest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but they didn't do that. And in fact, I mean, when you actually look at the language too, right? Like another one people love to quote is like the laws of nature and of nature is God. And it's like, why on
Mm.
earth do you think that refers to the Christian God? Like that is very
Because
clearly,
everything does, man. Like
I mean,
everything does.
yes. Yes. But that's the point. It's like it's only that way because you are a Christian. That's why you're reading that into that document. Yep.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, man, because I know
Yeah.
you're in the trenches and stuff. There may not be an answer to this question
I'll answer it
because
anyway.
as
I'll
you're
make one up.
talking, I'm thinking through like how I responded to some of these things before, and I can literally remember thinking things that you're talking about of me believing them, like we are the one true religion. Like I can remember thinking that very
Yeah.
thing, and because of that, we do have special status.
Yeah. It
Not
justifies all
just
kinds of things.
Yeah, yes, not just the United States, but in the world, we have
Mhm.
special status. How do you even push back against that? I mean, you take somebody like Mike Johnson, or they just lost, and we're not even going to worry about the Mike Johnsons. We're going to worry about all these other people that may be getting
Yeah.
ready to tip over because of the overreach.
Yeah, I mean, those. I think those are two kind of separate questions, and I think the latter one is important. And like, there are people we are not going to reach they are dyed in the wool Christian nationalists. They are not going to change their mind, and that we don't need to worry about those people. That doesn't mean that we can't drive this wave of Christian nationalism back to the fringe whence it came. We can do that, and we do that by going after that low hanging fruit, by getting those squishy people in the middle to realize that Christian nationalism is a threat to their equality, is a threat to their democracy, and at some point is going to come for them. And I mean, that I think is what you have been seeing. In fact, Pew just released a study showing that like more and more people are waking up to the threat of Christian nationalism. More people know what it is and recognize it as a threat than ever before. And so I mean I do think that's important. And yeah, like people like Mike Johnson, and politicians and preachers are particularly hard. Apologies for the unintentional alliteration there, folks. But they're particularly hard because their power depends on this disinformation and this propaganda and these
Yeah.
lies, right? So it's like they're also not going to give it up because of that until we make it so that there's a political cost that is associated with Christian nationalism. But one of the things that I tried to do, and I can feel myself getting up on a soapbox here, so head me off if you don't want me to. One of the things that I tried to do in the founding myth, and that I do in my work, is try to explain to people like how valuable the separation of church and state is, that it's the only reason we have true religious freedom in this country, and that it is one of the coolest fucking things this country has ever done. It's one of the best ideas the founders had, right? Like the wall of separation between church and state is an American original. It's an American invention. I mean, like the idea was kind of floating around the Enlightenment, but no country had ever tried it until we implemented it in the American experiment. Right? Until then, no other nation in the history of the world had sought to protect the ability of its citizens to think freely by separating religion and government. And that is something that we can and should be proud of as Americans. And we certainly shouldn't let people undermine it with these myths about being founded as a Christian nation.
It's so funny you say that. I literally watched a video yesterday of Dale Partridge. Are you familiar with Dale
God,
Partridge?
yes, yes.
Okay. So he had a video and it was, I can't remember if, I think it was a Hindu celebration somewhere in Texas. It was, like a local thing that was happening. And he was arguing that that was not what the founders meant when they talked about freedom of religion. He's arguing that it should be about your ability to worship the Christian God in different ways, right? Like that's what the founders meant. They didn't mean that you're free to worship a Hindu god, you're free to worship Islam or whatever it is. But he's literally watching this and talking about exactly what you just said from the opposite side.
Yeah,
It
Dale
was
Partridge does not know what he is talking about.
no, he doesn't at all.
Yeah, he is not a smart person or well educated about America, what American means, American history, or the founding. One of the quotes that came to mind when you were explaining what he said was, "There's this wonderful letter that George Washington wrote to the Toro Synagogue, to a Jewish congregation, when he's talking essentially about religious freedom." And he's kind of, at the time, it's 1791, he's sort of doing this tour to kind of stump for the new country and the Bill of Rights. And he says that the government of the United States gives, quote, "to bigotry no sanction." And he's talking about that in the context of religious freedom, meaning the exact opposite of what Dale Does Not Understand America Partridge is trying to say there, right? Washington is saying that you as Americans get to choose if, how, when you're going to worship one God, no gods, every God there is. And then another one that came to mind was Thomas Jefferson's autobiography. And in it, he's recounting the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. And the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, people don't know, passed 1785, 1786 in Virginia. It's recognized as the forerunner to the First Amendment in a lot of ways. Helped separate church and state in Virginia, helped disestablish the Anglican Church there. It was written by Thomas Jefferson, and it was passed by James Madison, who came to be known as the father of our Constitution, the father of the Bill of Rights. And Jefferson, in his autobiography, recounts how there was an attempt made to add Jesus Christ to the beginning of this statute for religious freedom, and it was rejected by the, quote, great majority, because that statute meant to comprehend within the mantle of its protection the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Mohammedan, the Hindu and infidel of every denomination. So, I don't know, Dale Partridge, pick up a book and read it. You don't know what you're talking about. Here's Thomas Jefferson literally saying religious freedom includes the Hindu and the infidel. Yeah, that idea is just fundamentally wrong. That is a Christian nationalist idea, and it is fully un-American.
I like the idea. All of what you said was fantastic. And of course, there were things in there that you said that I wasn't aware of. But I love the fact that you just called Dale Partridge and his ilk un-American. I love that so much, because even, as of this recording last night, and when people listen to it, it wasn't the day before, but during a recording last night, we had our planning meeting for the next No Kings, or the day of action that's coming up on June 27th, and then kind of brainstorming what our next No Kings is. And so for the day of action, and I'm hoping that we push it forward to other things, but the idea of a theme came forward, and the theme is reclaiming patriotism, and underneath it, it's not a subtitle, but you know what I mean, is a love for country is a love for all its people.
Yeah.
And the conversation was, we've got to stop just talking about what we're against and start reclaiming some of these things and saying, no, we love the country too. No. That's un-American. What you're saying is un-American. So I love the fact that you unintentionally, intentionally, whatever, but that you brought that up, that no. That's actually un-American.
No, I mean, it is. Christian nationalism is fundamentally un-American. I mean, the idea that conservative, straight, white Christian men should be a special favored class, which is what Christian nationalism is fundamentally un-American. I mean, Christian nationalism is this idea that America was founded as a Christian nation, that we're based on Judeo-Christian principles, and most importantly, that we've strayed from that foundation, that we've gotten away from our godly roots. And so they use the language of return to justify, all manner of hateful, often evil public policy, right? Like the Muslim ban
Yes.
from Trump 1.0, the child separation policy from at the border from Trump 1.0, which they justified by citing Romans 13, Project Blitz, I mean, the opposition to gay marriage and other LGBTQ rights and equality, it's almost exclusively Christian nationalist at this point. And it is not a scholarly debate about our history or how we're founded. It is a sinister, exclusionary movement. It is an attempt to redefine America according to the Christian nationalist identity, and then to reshape our law accordingly, so that to be an American is to be a Christian, and to be a Christian is to be an American. And that idea is un-American. This is a political theology that is an existential threat to a government of the people, for the people, and people. I've been saying that for a really, really long time. They proved me right on January 6th. That threat is why I wrote The Founding Myth. I mean, the subtitle of The Founding Myth is Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. And it's not often that you choose a subtitle for a book and then the subject runs out to prove you right by assaulting the U.S. Capitol and attempting to overturn the results of a free and fair election. And it is, I mean, I said this at the beginning, but it's worth repeating here, because it's not just un-American, but it's also the very identity of Christian nationalists like Partridge depends on disinformation. The entire identity is based on disinformation. And like we heard it at the 250th, right? We're one nation under God. In God we trust. The Declaration of Independence references the Christian God 4 different times. They prayed at the Constitutional Convention. George Washington knelt in the snow at Valley Forge and got on his knees and prayed, right? Our laws are based on the 10 Commandments. None of that is true. And without the historical cover that these lies give, and that the political cover that preachers like Partridge give, many of these policy justifications crumble. So without their origin myths, and this is the important part, without those myths, their identity withers. So their entire political and ideological reality is vulnerable and weak because it is based on disinformation. And that becomes just more and more clear when you explore the myths and the lies behind this truly un-American political ideology. And just one last point on this is that Christian nationalism, the Christian nationalism of Partridge, is so thoroughly opposed to the principles on which the United States was built. Those two systems differ and conflict in just fundamental and irreconcilable ways. So clearly that it is fair to say that America will never be a Christian nation, because the moment it becomes a Christian nation, it will cease to be America.
Yeah, I just want to let that sit for a second. I think that's true. I've got lots of thoughts running through my brain. One of the things that I've said this many times. So like I'm still like, I do this stuff with Reason Reality and Luke and Jen, who are some of the other co-creators and stuff. And we all come together over shared values, right? Like Luke and I have very similar backgrounds. Jen has saved herself a lot of therapy. She, without, no church background or anything. And we have found a lot of common ground because of shared values. And I've said this to them, I've said this to other people. And even as a progressive, I mean, that's just what I am, a progressive pastor, I am so tired. I mean, exhausted of hearing about Christianity every freaking day. Dude, I'm just so tired of it. Like I just don't want to. I don't want to hear about it in the news. I don't want to hear about it from some podium in Washington. I just don't. Like I'm so tired of it. So I cannot imagine how other people that are not Christian, that exist outside of this framework, feel. Because if I'm sick of it, like it's to the point where it's just like, dude, stop. Just don't say the word. Stop. Just I'm going to turn it off. I don't want to hear it. I just can't imagine what other people feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it is, you're swimming in it, right? It's what's that old story about, the two young goldfish are swimming around and they see the older goldfish and he says, oh, how's the water, kids? And swims by, and then the one young goldfish looks at the other and says, what's water, right? Like we're just swimming in Christianity in this country, but to your earlier point, my friend Chrissy Stroop put it really nicely, and this has become just like one of my North Stars in this fight, is she said that shared values matter more than shared beliefs.
Yes. 100%.
And that, I mean, that to me is just, that's where it's at. And like, I would rather have a drink and a chat and a beer and guacamole and chips with a group of Christians who value, anti-racism and social justice than with a group of anti-equality atheists. Like, I'm an atheist. There aren't many anti-equality atheists, but there are some, and those exists are kind of loud. Maybe all atheists are a little loud, but I think it's particularly, and this to me is like when we are facing authoritarianism and fascism, that's when shared values matter even more. So shared values matter far more when we as a nation face an existential threat like white Christian nationalism, right? So my dream would be to live in a country where the separation of church and state is absolute, right? To quote JFK, where it's valued by everybody, where we all understand that true religious freedom can only exist with a secular government. When we get that there is no freedom of religion without a government that is free from religion, right? I want to live in a country where the nonprofit I work for is unnecessary, where you and I can get together and we can have these deep, fascinating conversations about God and the nature of the universe, and disagree. But right now we're fighting a movement that, if it really solidifies its power, would make those conversations impossible, illegal. That would privilege white Christians above straight white conservative Christians above everybody else. That would create this America with two classes of people. So, our country is on fire, right? Our democracy isn't slipping away. It is being stolen. The republic is being strangled. And those of us who share values like equality and justice and truth and fairness must come together to stop the arsonist, the thief, the murderer. And that means coming together over those shared values and fighting against white Christian nationalism.
I love that. Let's park there for a minute. Actually, let's park there for the remainder of our time. I really want to, specifically because there's a side project that I'm proposing with another group, and it's centered around healthy masculinity. And one of the things that we're talking about is how that we can't recreate echo chambers, right? Like, if we're talking about healthy masculinity, it can't just be to the people that already agree, right? We're just talking to each other, and we're not reaching anybody that actually needs to hear this or needs to be part of the conversation. And so it's like we're talking about how to broaden that conversation with men that maybe aren't necessarily would be labeled progressive, but are still healthy enough to have curiosity and be able to have nuanced conversations without, not inviting MAGA or red pill culture into the conversation. And the point being is to show that there's still more in common than not with most people. Again, like you said, there are going to be people over here that we are just not going to reach. And I'm not going to spin my wheels with them. But to your point, to the broader point, how do we communicate that? How do we help people see that there are people that do have shared values? How do we have that conversation with your crazy uncle at the dinner table?
Yeah.
In such a way that helps them see, wait a second, we might disagree on the approach, right? And again, that's nuance. That's not MAGA, but we want the same thing. It's like, how do we even begin to start having that conversation?
Okay, I'll say three things here. I'll say first is you can share values with somebody and it's not going to be all values. It's just not. Like, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, thinking about simplify this a little bit. This is very much an oversimplification of our conversation, but essentially, like, look, I agree with this candidate on like 90% of it, but this other, vote for them. Like, well, look, man, if you are looking for somebody that you agree with on 100% of things to vote for, you need to get off your ass and run for office. This is the only person you're going to agree with on 100% of everything is yourself. Like, you're not marrying this person. You're electing them to do a job, and for a limited amount of time. But the same thing holds here, right? Like, you are not going to share every value with every person, and that's okay. You can ally and align on those projects and in those areas where you do share values, and where you don't and you disagree, like sharing those and overlapping and showing those shared values, right? Like, that can be a source for both of you to grow, like let's just take Tim Whitaker, and I think he'll be okay with me talking about this. Like, right, we disagree about like one of the most fundamental questions in the universe, like, is there a God or not? I say, I don't think so. He says there is. And we agree on, 95% of other things, probably, or 99% that we've talked about. And that disagreement, even though it is on this big fundamental question, like, I love that. Like, and I love, we like, if our text message chain ever ever goes public, it's going to be hilarious for people because like we joke with each other about this all the time. Like, and that's okay. And it actually, it make the focusing on what we do agree on and coming together on what we do agree on makes those disagreements better in a way, like, and it gives him a different outlook on atheists and me a different outlook on Christians. It makes it better for everybody, really. So that's one thing. It's you're not going to agree with everybody on all things, and you shouldn't have to, and that's okay. That's okay. And there's no reason to exclude people, for not. Two is when you're having these conversations and thinking about this is that, I mean, the number one thing is you've got to temper your expectations. A lot of people that I talk to who are having these conversations, and actually at the Summit for Religious Freedom, we do a whole organizing institute around kind of how to have these conversations. And a lot of people are like, okay, Andrew, we'll take the founding myth as an example, right? Like, I got the founding myth, I got the book, I got all the arguments down, I'm ready to go. I'm going to convince my uncle that Christian nationalism is wrong over Thanksgiving dinner. It's like, well, no, you're not. Temper your expectations here, because like you are never actually going to persuade somebody to change their mind. The only thing you can do is help them change their own mind. You will never change somebody's mind. They have to change their own mind. And it's very, very rare that you are going to walk into a conversation and persuade somebody in that conversation to change their mind. It can happen. You should not expect it to. It is incredibly rare. Your goal in that conversation should be to create some cognitive dissonance, to create a safe environment for that person to question, and to leave the door open for them to come back to you. And this really this goes to kind of the third point that I want to make, which is you're not going to convince the person. They need to convince themselves. The way that you can help them is by learning how to do what's called active listening and practice active listening and ask them questions that create that cognitive dissonance, that dissonance, that plant those seeds of doubt and of dissonance in their mind about whether or not this ideology that they adhere to, this outlook that they have about the world, is true and accurate. And I mean, the reason I think that's so important is you like leave the door open for them to come back and ask you follow-up questions. And maybe you recommend a book to them, or maybe you don't. And maybe you just ask them a whole series of follow-up questions when they come back to you with the answer that they got on, Red Pill YouTube. I'll tell two stories real quick. One, actually, no, I'm just going to tell the one story. There was an attorney who I was working against in Texas on a case, and I'm obviously changing details here to protect this person's identity a little bit. And this was a case involving school district, and we talked over the law. I was right. His client was wrong. We fixed that, and then he was like, at the end of it, he was like, "Can I just ask you a question? Like, you really don't believe in God at all?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not pushing my view on him or anything like that. Just like, yeah, no." He's like, "But like, why?" I'm like, "Well, I just, to me, there's no evidence for the existence of God. Everything else, like, it kind of gave him like a 1 or 2 cents thing. Okay, okay, all right, thanks." And then he hung up. And then like 3 weeks later, he calls back. He's like, "If I wanted to, like, what would you tell me to read if I wanted to read something?" And I don't remember what book I recommended what book. And this goes on for like 2 years. And every now and then we have like a little bit of a longer conversation. Every now and then we have, a deeper one, and he'll ask me things. And eventually he's like, yeah, I think maybe you're right. And that was kind of like the last time that we talked. This was years ago. And I wasn't pushing him. I wasn't trying to persuade him. All I was doing was providing him a little bit of space for him to change his own mind, and being a safe place. How dare we use that phrase, for there to be that kind of questioning, which doesn't exist for people who are in MAGA, and doesn't exist for people who are often in Christianity. That's more effective in being that safe place for people. And look, I'm not, please don't, if you're listening, please don't please don't think I'm telling you to go out and do that with your asshole uncle who's anti-LGBTQ and, you're gay and you can't say it. Like, no, don't, protect yourself first and foremost. But if this is something that you are wanting to do, just keep those three things in mind. You're not going to agree with everybody on everything. That's okay. Temper your expectations about how long it's going to take somebody to change their own mind, and go into it with that open, questioning, active listening mentality.
Yes, I think that's incredibly wise. I think that one of the areas that, if I know it's not this binary, but if we're going to look at the right and the left, I think one of the areas that the left has woefully failed at is the long term, is seeing the things of the
Oh
long
yeah.
game, right?
Oh yeah.
The right was really good. I mean, they've been plotting this for decades,
Oh
and
yeah.
they just been planting seeds. But I'll say we, very reactionary, love a good purity test and love to recreate fundamentalism in our spaces. And what you talked about just now is being very strategic in how we approach this, right? Like, because I can't tell you how many people I've had that conversation with of like, well, let's just use the last election. Well, Harris, XYZ, and like it's this little stuff, and they should have, she should have platformed this voice and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, but how is it any better now? Now we're bombing the Middle East, and now we're like, which is better? Now they're bulldozing Gaza. They're going to put up a Trump hotel and casino, right? Like, what's better? What's better? But we want our purity tests. So I really appreciate the nuance and the way that you approach that, where it's like, no, this is very strategic. We have to keep the end goal in mind, not just the reaction that social media has trained us for. I think that's incredibly wise.
Yeah, and I mean, it is very easy to give in to that outrage, and that is what performs well on social media. You're right, and yeah, I mean, it feels good too, right? It's like a little bit of a drug rush almost to give into that outrage and vent it, and I do it. Like, you can definitely go find videos of me being pissed off and dunking on people who are being stupid on social media. And I will continue to do that, right? Like,
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
always going to be, taking the high road. And I think that's okay. But yeah, I do. I mean, this is the way to change minds, right? I'm not laboring under the illusion that any of my dunking videos are going to change people's minds. They're going to make people who agree with me feel good. That's it. And me feel a little bit good. And maybe give me a follower or two, but like that.
That's
Yeah.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah, it is. But I do think, your point about the other side playing the long game is incredibly important. And it's absolutely true. I mean, they've done that so much better than we.
Okay, I want to land the plane here because I want to respect your time because I know you've got lots to do. But if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, "Holy crap, dude, this is such a huge topic. We're talking about like people in huge positions of power, and I'm just regular Joe Blow who lives in 1234 Main Street in the Midwest. What in the world could I possibly do?"
Yeah,
What would you say?
that's a really good question. And I mean, I think there's a million things that everybody listening to this can do. I mean, go back and listen to the last 10 minutes of me rambling. And I mean, you can hear how to have, conversations like this, and go back and listen to the first 10 minutes and hear why you should be hopeful about having conversations like this. Take Joe and Tim and Monty as examples, right? It's like, this is something that you in your everyday life can implement. Again, safety first. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that people can do. You can certainly be active. I mean, I love the fact that you're out there planning rallies and marches. There's something that everybody can do that plays to their strengths, right? Like early on in the One Nation Indivisible podcast, which I host and I only do every now and then these days, I did a joint episode with Brad Onishi with basically like a menu of activism that people could choose from, like, well, based on like what appeals to them. I mean, I would say that like one of the best things you can do is arm yourself against the disinformation of Christian nationalism. Know how to counter it. My publisher fucking hates it when I say this, but go to the public library and get a copy of the founding myth and read up and learn some of those arguments. And talk about it, especially coming up on July 4th and the 250th. Like, there's going to be so much bad disinformation out there. You're going to see it in your local paper. Write them a letter to the editor. Maybe write an op-ed. You're going to see it on your uncle's social media Facebook page, right? Like, stick with your crazy uncle. Maybe try a new tactic. Social media is a terrible place to engage, by the way, like, and try to have these conversations. Like, I just don't recommend it. But like, you could text your uncle, for instance. They post something crazy, be like, "Hey, I saw that post you had about the Declaration of Independence, and it said our creator. It really got me curious, and I just went and looked at the language, and it turns out it's their creator. And then I was looking, and there's actually no mention of Jesus or the Christian God anywhere. I'm just curious. Like, did you know that? I didn't know that, right? Like, did you? That's gonna be a thinker for that person, right? You're not saying, "Hey, you were fucking wrong about this. This is what it actually," you know what I mean? Like, And so I mean, and there's a bunch of groups that are out here doing the work of fighting Christian nationalism. Americans United for Separation of Church and State brings together people of all religions and none to fight for that founding American ideal, you know, in the courts of public opinion, in the public square, and legislatures everywhere. You know, and if that's not for you, like you're like, no, I'm definitely an atheist. That's what I check out the Freedom from Religion Foundation or American Atheists. You know, you're more humanist. There's the American Humanist Association. Nope, I'm definitely religious, and, you know, check out the Baptist Joint Committee, right? There's a ton of great groups that are out here doing this work and fighting Christian nationalism. And I mean, this is the time we need people's help now more than ever. We really, really do. And if you know, people are curious about that, check out au.org. There's a lot more information to kind of help folks along.
Yeah, we'll make sure all of that's in the show notes so people can find that quickly, including that episode that you talked about with you and Brad Onishi. I'm gonna go listen to it when I'm off of here because I love his stuff too. So
He's great. I really love Brad.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Andrew, man, I feel like I've got so many questions that like
Let's do it again. We'll do it again.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah.
So really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and talk about, not only talk about your book, but just like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of really good wisdom here, man. Appreciate all that you're doing. Not just here, but in our country. Thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. You know, I love this fight. To me, this is the fight of our times, and I'm never gonna stop fighting. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure that you hit those show notes and click those links and stuff. And if you have not read The Founding Myth, I could not recommend it more. Just be ready to be overwhelmed by the amount of information that's in there. Cause it's just like you said, it settles the debate once and for all. So yeah, appreciate it, man. Thanks for following along, friends. I hope that wherever you find yourself today, that you're having the exact day that you need. And don't forget, you might be the only voice of reason that somebody hears today. So don't be afraid to use it. All right, everybody. Until next time.